I am Madison, and this is the exact second my world shattered into a million sharp, expensive pieces. I was standing in a mudslick slum on the outskirts of Seattle, caked in filth while handing out medicine from a rusted shipping container. Then, a man in a $3,000 suit stepped out of a black town car, looking like a ghost from a life I never had. It was Benjamin, my billionaire grandfather. He did not say hello, he just looked at my container, then at my mud-stained face, and asked a question that turned my blood to ice. He said, "Madison, where has your $3 million trust fund gone?" That is when I realized the people who were supposed to protect me had not just been cruel, they were thieves. Have you ever been lied to by the people closest to you, the ones who were supposed to protect you? Drop a comment and tell me your story. I want to know who else has survived a betrayal this deep. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. I did not cry, I did not ask why, I did not even blink as the freezing Seattle rain began to wash the mud off my medical scrubs. Looking at Benjamin, I felt a strange, clinical clarity wash over me. I had spent years in medical school learning how to diagnose trauma, but I did not need a textbook to see the massive, bleeding hole in my own life. This was not a mental breakdown, it was a balance sheet. I realized right then that I had been the silent investor in Stephanie's version of a family. And for 7 years, I had been footing the bill with my own suffering. "Come inside, Benjamin," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of the warmth I usually reserved for my patients. I led him toward my home, a corrugated metal container that smelled like damp iron and the cheap antiseptic I used to keep the place sterile. My grandfather had to duck his head to enter. His eyes scanned the cramped space, landing on my single cot, the small propane heater that barely worked, and the mountain of medical textbooks I had bought with money earned from scrubbing hospital floors at 3 in the morning. I could see the fury vibrating under his tailored coat, but I was already moving. I did not need a hug, I needed access. I sat down on the edge of the cot and pulled out my cracked smartphone. Benjamin sat next to me and opened a leather portfolio, revealing the secondary access codes he had kept in a vault in New York. I felt like a surgeon about to make the first incision. I did not hesitate. I dialed the private wealth management line for the trust. When the representative picked up, my voice was steady and cold. I provided the security pins Benjamin whispered to me. Within 3 minutes, I was looking at the digital heartbeat of my $3 million legacy, or what was left of it. I watched the screen as sub-accounts bled into household management fees and educational transfers that had nothing to do with me. I told the representative to revoke every single authorization, freeze every secondary credit card, and change the primary biometric access to my thumbprint alone. "Ma'am, that will immediately decline any pending transactions from the secondary cardholders," the man on the line warned. "That is the point," I replied. I watched the status change from active to permanent lock, just like that. The invisible cord Stephanie had been using to strangle my future was severed. Right as I clicked the final confirmation, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Stephanie. She was at a high-end boutique, probably picking out more silk scarves she did not need. The message read, "Madison, I just saw the bill for your medical boards. You need to pull 3 extra night shifts this week to cover it. We're contributing so much to Emily's bridal shower, and you need to do your part for the family. Do not be selfish." I stared at the screen. For years, her gaslighting had worked. Her voice had been the soundtrack of my life, telling me I was a burden, that I was lucky they had taken me in after the floods. But now, that voice was just noise. My compassion had been a luxury Stephanie had overdrafted for nearly a decade. The account was finally empty. I did not type a long paragraph. I did not beg for an explanation. I just sent 3 words back. "The bank is closed, permanent lock." I looked at my hands, raw and red from the industrial soap I used to scrub hospital floors at 2 in the morning. For 7 years, these hands had built someone else's empire while I lived in the wreckage of my own. Stephanie had turned my survival into a high-interest loan I could never repay. After the floods took my parents when I was 15, she did not offer a home, she offered a cell. She told me, every single day, that I was a phase, not a future. She convinced me that my breath was a gift I had to earn by being useful. I realize now that I was living in a prison without bars. It is what doctors call learned helplessness, a state where you have been told you are worthless so often that you start to believe it is a fact of nature. When you are trapped in a psychological cage for long enough, you stop looking for the exit. Even when the door is wide open, those invisible chains were heavier than iron ones. Stephanie made me believe that without her, I was just a girl who should have drowned with her parents. I became a survivor who forgot how to live, only knowing how to serve. While I was working 3 jobs, scrubbing floors, washing dishes, And cleaning, just to pay my medical school tuition. Stephanie was living a life of hilltop luxury off my blood. I remember the day I had to walk 10 kilometers through a freezing Seattle downpour because I did not have $5 for the bus. That was the same afternoon Stephanie withdrew $20,000 from my account to buy a premier membership at the Hilltop Golf Club. The math of my life never added up. For nearly a decade, she withdrew $20,000 every single month from the $3 million trust Benjamin had left for me. She spent it on Emily's designer wardrobe, private tutors, and that white marble villa on the hill. Meanwhile, I was told the family was struggling. I was told that my contribution, my literal sweat and exhaustion, was the only thing keeping a roof over our heads. Stephanie's silence did not last long. I expected a call, a scream, or a frantic plea for the lock to be lifted. Instead, she chose a more public, more toxic weapon. I opened my laptop to find the first strike on social media. It was a photo of Emily standing in a cloud of white lace. A designer wedding dress that cost exactly $50,000. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive cruelty. It read, "So blessed to be able to give my daughter the dream she deserves." It is truly heartbreaking when certain family members suffer from deep mental trauma and invent imaginary stories about trust funds just to get attention. We are praying for our niece's recovery and hoping she finds the help she clearly needs. I stared at the screen, analyzing the words with clinical detachment. This was the trap of cruel normalization. Stephanie and Emily were not just being mean, they had spent 7 years convincing themselves that this disparity was the natural order of the world. In their heads, they had sanitized their own theft by turning me into a victim of my own unstable mind. They felt absolutely no guilt for spending $20,000 a month of my money because they had normalized my suffering to the point where it was invisible to them. To them, Madison was the girl who belonged in the mud, while they were the royalty who belonged on the hill. Their entitlement was not a choice anymore, it was their reality. Then, my phone pinged with a direct message from Emily. It was a photo she must have taken from her car earlier that day. It showed my rusted container, mud-stained, surrounded by piles of storm debris and trash. Her message followed, "Found your new office, Maddie. It matches your personality perfectly. A total failure living in the mud while I am up here on the hilltop. Do not think for a second you are one of us. You are just a charity case who finally got bored of playing nice. Go back to your trash." I did not answer. I did not block her. I simply took a screenshot and added it to a digital folder labeled Evidence. My grandfather, Benjamin, was standing by the container door, his eyes scanning the screen of my laptop. The fury radiating off him was almost hot enough to warm the cold metal walls. "They think your life is a joke, Madison," he said, his voice low and vibrating with a lethal kind of calm. "No," I replied, closing the laptop. "They do not think I have a life at all. To them, I am just a line item they finally decided to cross off the ledger. They are not shocked by what they have done, they are just shocked that I have stopped playing the role of the silent investor." I looked at my raw, red hands. I had been a subscription they had enjoyed for 7 years, and they were furious that the payment had finally bounced. Benjamin did not waste another second. He picked up his phone and called in the heavy hitters. Within 2 hours, the cramped, iron walls of my container were filled with the presence of 2 men who looked like they were made of sharpened steel and expensive wool: David Clean, my grandfather's lead attorney, and Marcus, a private investigator who specialized in tracing money that did not want to be found. They did not look at me with pity, they looked at me as a witness to a $3 million crime. David Clean opened a laptop, his fingers moving with clinical precision as he pulled up the full transaction history of the trust. $3 million? For years, I had believed that my parents had left me with nothing but a legacy of debt and survival. Now, I watched as the screen displayed the reality: $20,000 a month, every month, like a digital heartbeat that Stephanie had been harvesting for herself. I saw Benjamin turn toward the small, fog-up window of the container. The silence in the room was heavy, but the silence coming from him was the loudest of all. He was drowning in the silent regret of a watchman who had fallen asleep at his post. He had let his own grief over losing my mother become a shield that Stephanie used to hide her crimes. He had trusted the legal system and the monthly reports Stephanie had forged for 7 years, because believing I was safe allowed him to stay away from the pain of his own memories. But looking at the rust on my walls and the red on my hands, he realized that his absence had not just been a choice, it had been a catalyst for my destruction. "Madison," David Clean said, his voice cutting through the heavy atmosphere, "we can see where the money went, but we need proof that you did not authorize these lifestyle expenses. She is going to claim she spent this money on your behalf as a member of the household." I did not blink. I reached under my cot and pulled out a battered, black composition notebook. I had kept it since I was 15. It was not a diary of feelings, it was a ledger of survival. Inside, I had documented every single time Stephanie had sat me down at the kitchen table and forced me to sign a family contribution waiver or a household maintenance authorization. I showed them the pages where I had recorded the dates, the exact threats she used, telling me I would be on the streets if I did not sign, and the photos I had secretly taken of the expenses she was claiming. I had a photo of the receipt for Emily's original prom dress, $3,500, which Stephanie had filed as Madison's emergency dental surgery. I had the date of the Aruba trip she claimed was for my rehabilitation, while I was actually working 3 shifts at the local clinic. To pay for my own books, every forged signature she had forced me to pen was a nail in her own coffin. David Clean pointed to a digital scan of a withdrawal authorization for $1 million. The transaction was dated just 21 days ago, timed perfectly to finalize the payment on Emily's white marble villa on the hill. But it was the signature at the bottom that made the air in my container feel thin and sharp like a razor. It was my name, Madison, written in a confident, flowing script that I had never once touched to paper. Stephanie had not just been withdrawing my money, she had been impersonating me to empty the very last of my inheritance. Marcus, the investigator, cleared his throat and gestured toward the rusted, second-hand medical monitor sitting on my desk. He pulled out a donation manifest from 3 years ago, signed by my grandfather, Benjamin. It turned out that Benjamin had donated a full suite of state-of-the-art medical equipment, worth $500,000, to this specific relief organization to support my work, but the criminal twist went deeper. Stephanie had filed a fraudulent report with the trust, claiming that I had personally sold those machines for cash to fund an unrecorded life of partying and excess in the city. She did not just steal my future, she had systematically manufactured a criminal profile for me to ensure that if I ever spoke up, no one would believe in. Unstable dropout, over a respected member of the Hilltop Golf Club, she had turned my clinic, the only place where I felt like a human being, into a stage for her forgery. The air at the Hilltop Villa smelled like expensive lavender and victory. Stephanie stood in the center of the marble foyer, a glass of vintage champagne in one hand and the deed to the property in the other. She was celebrating the final payment on Emily's inheritance, a payment made with the last $1 million of my stolen life. They were toasting to legacy while the rain I had lived in for 7 years hammered against their stained glass windows. Then, the sirens cut through the music. The front doors did not just open, they were cleared. My grandfather, Benjamin, walked in with the silent weight of a man who owned the ground they stood on. Behind him were uniformed officers and David Clean, holding a stack of forensic evidence that turned their celebration into a crime scene. I followed them. I was not wearing mud-stained scrubs anymore. I wore a crisp, white medical coat, a symbol of the career I built while Stephanie tried to bury me in a shipping container. I looked at the marble floors and the $50,000 wedding dress Emily was displaying for her guests. Stephanie's face went from a celebratory red to a clinical white. She dropped her glass, it shattered on the marble, sounding like my heart used to when she called me a burden. Benjamin, she gasped, her voice shrill with panic, this is a private party, you cannot just burst in like this. It is not a party, Stephanie, Benjamin said, his voice cold and factual, it is a seizure. David Clean handed her a document. It was a court-ordered seizure of all assets traceable to the $3 million trust. Every bottle of wine and the very roof over her head was now legally mine. The power flip happened in a heartbeat. Stephanie looked at the police, then at Benjamin, and finally, she turned to me. She sank to her knees, her silk dress pooling on the floor. She began sobbing, reaching for my white coat with hands that had spent 7 years robbing me blind. Madison, please, she begged, her gaslighting replaced by a pathetic whimper. We are family. I am your mother's sister. Think of the bond. I took you in when you had nothing. You cannot let them take everything from Emily. I looked down at her. I did not feel pity. I felt the detached clarity of an auditor. My compassion was a luxury she had overdrafted for a decade, and the account was closed. You did not take me in to save me, Stephanie, I said. My voice was calm and lethal. You took me in to harvest me. You used my life as a life vest while you tried to drown me in the slums. You are not family, you are just a clerical error in my life, and I just finished correcting the books. I turned to the officers. Please clear the premises. As they escorted a screaming Stephanie and a stunned Emily out into the rain, I did not watch. I walked to the window and looked at Seattle. The silent investor in my suffering was gone. The ledger was balanced. This was the eviction of dignity. The trial did not last nearly as long as the 7 years of hell I endured under Stephanie's roof. The evidence David and Marcus uncovered was undeniable, and the judge had zero patience for Stephanie's fake tears. She was sentenced to 12 years in a federal facility for embezzlement, forgery, And fraud. When they led her away in handcuffs, she did not look like the sophisticated socialite from the Hilltop Golf Club anymore. She just looked like a small, broken woman who had run out of other people's money to spend. Emily did not face criminal charges because she was a minor during most of the theft, but the legal system stripped her of every luxury she had ever flaunted. The Hilltop villa was seized and liquidated, along with her cars and her $50,000 wedding dress. To pay back the restitution she owed the trust, she was forced to take a job cleaning at the very same community center clinic where I once worked while living in a container. Life has a cold, clinical way of bringing you back to the mud you once thought you were too good for. Watching their collapse was a final lesson in the illusion of the power of an empty wallet. For years, Stephanie and Emily performed a version of family that was just a high-priced subscription they could not actually afford. Their status was a rental, paid for with my stolen life. And the moment the funds were cut off, their class evaporated instantly. They had no internal value to stand on when the external wealth was gone. They realized too late that you cannot buy a legacy, you have to build one. I took the recovered $3 million and established the Benjamin and Mother Fund. We do not just provide medical supplies, we build high-quality mobile clinics to ensure that no student or survivor ever has to choose between their health and their future. Every time I sign a grant for a young doctor, I am planting a seed in the same ground where Stephanie tried to bury me. I finally understand that the best retaliation is not destruction, it is becoming the person they tried to convince you that you could never be. Tonight, I am standing on the balcony of my penthouse, looking out over the lights of Seattle. The rain is still falling, but I am finally in the warmth. I am holding my mother's old stethoscope in my hand, a reminder that her legacy was never about the money, but about the courage to care. For the first time in my life, I am not just surviving, I am home. If you believe that justice always prevails, please press like and share this video to spread the power of integrity. Thank you for listening to my story.